The stars looked different today. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship, the USS Liberty, watching the huge metal shapes moving toward them through space. He had been waiting for this moment for weeks. The Zarian Empire was coming, and everyone in the human fleet knew what that meant. Jake was not a young man anymore. His hair was gray at the sides, and he had deep lines around his eyes from years of looking at star charts and enemy ships. But his hands were steady as he held his coffee cup, and his voice was calm when he spoke to his crew. "How many ships are we looking at, Amy?" he asked. Lieutenant Amy Collins looked up from her computer screen. She was the ship's communications officer, a smart woman with short brown hair and quick fingers that never stopped moving across her keyboard. "Sir, I count 347 ships in their main fleet. The big ones are each about 10 times the size of our largest ships." Jake nodded. He had expected this. The Zarian Empire did not do anything small. When they came to conquer a world, they brought enough firepower to turn planets into dust. They had done it before to other species who had tried to stand against them. "And how many ships do we have?" Jake asked, though he already knew the answer. 23, sir," Amy replied. "All of our ships combined." The bridge was quiet for a moment. Everyone knew the numbers. Everyone knew what those numbers usually meant. In the past 1,000 years, no one had ever stood against the Zarian Empire and lived to tell about it. Lieutenant Pete Johnson, the weapons officer, was a big man with thick arms and a beard that was always perfectly trimmed. He looked nervous as he checked his weapon systems for the 10th time that morning. "Sir, all weapons are ready. Shields are at full power. But I have to say, I don't think it's going to matter much." Jake smiled. "Don't worry, Pete. Everything will be fine." Lieutenant Lisa Parker, the ship's engineer, was working at her station near the back of the bridge. She was a small woman with red hair that she kept tied back in a tight ponytail. She never looked worried about anything, even now. "Captain, all systems are running perfectly. The coffee makers are ready too, just in case we need them." Jake laughed. "Good thinking, Lisa. We might need that coffee." The other crew members looked at each other with confusion. Why was the captain talking about coffee when they were about to face the most powerful military force in the known galaxy? But they had learned to trust Jake Morrison. He had been their captain for 5 years, and he had never let them down. The communication system made a loud beeping sound. Amy's fingers flew across her keyboard as she received the incoming message. "Sir, we're getting a transmission from the Zarian flagship. They want to talk to you." "Put it on the main screen," Jake said. The front screen of the bridge lit up with the image of Admiral Kethver, the leader of the Zarian fleet. He was a tall alien with gray skin and 4 yellow eyes. His mouth was full of sharp teeth, and he wore a black uniform covered with medals and symbols of rank. Behind him, the bridge of his ship was huge and dark, filled with other alien officers working at their stations. "Humans of the Sol system," Admiral Kethver said in a deep voice that seemed to shake the walls of the Liberty. "I am Admiral Kethver of the Zarian Empire. Your species has expanded beyond your homeworld without permission from the Empire. This cannot be allowed." Jake took a sip of his coffee and waited for the alien to continue. "Your colony world of New Haven is now under Imperial control," the Admiral continued. "Your species will submit to Imperial rule immediately, or you will be destroyed. Every ship, every station, every human in this system will be turned to dust. You have 1 day to give us your answer." The screen went black. The bridge was quiet again. Amy looked at her captain. "Sir, should I prepare a response?" Jake set down his coffee cup and looked around at his crew. These were good people. They had families back on Earth and New Haven. They had joined the space fleet to protect those families and their way of life. They deserved to know what was about to happen. "Let me tell you something about the Zarian Empire," Jake said. "They have conquered over 3,000 star systems. They have destroyed entire species who refuse to bow down to them. Their ships are bigger than ours, their weapons are more powerful, and they have been doing this for 1,000 years. Pete Johnson shifted in his chair. "Sir, that's not making me feel better," Jake smiled. "Here's the thing they don't know about. US, we've been fighting wars for thousands of years too. Not against aliens, but against each other. We've gotten really, really good at it. We've built weapons that can crack planets in half. We've built defenses that can stop almost anything. But most importantly, we've learned something that the Xerians never learned. What's that, sir? Amy asked. We learned that the best way to win a fight is to make sure your enemy doesn't want to fight you in the first place. Lisa Parker looked up from her engineering station. Captain, are you saying we're going to fight them? Jake picked up his coffee cup again. Lisa, fighting implies that both sides have a chance of winning. What we're about to do isn't fighting, it's more like teaching. The captain pressed a button on his chair that opened a communication channel to all the ships in the human fleet. Attention all ships, this is Captain Morrison. I know you all heard the message from our new friends. They want us to surrender or be destroyed. They think we're just a primitive species that got lucky enough to build a few spaceships. Jake paused and looked out at the stars. I want everyone to remember something. We are humans. Our ancestors survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and the vacuum of space itself. We built these ships with our own hands. We came out here to the stars because we refused to be limited by the boundaries of one world. And now some aliens think they can just show up and tell us what to do? The captain's voice grew stronger. I want you all to think about your families. Back home. Think about your children, your parents, your friends. Think about the life we've built out here among the stars. Now I want you to think about these Xerians telling us we can't have that life anymore. Jake looked around the bridge at his crew. Amy was smiling. Pete was checking his weapons again, but now he looked excited instead of nervous. Lisa was humming softly while she worked at her station. Does anyone here think we should surrender? To these aliens? Jake asked. No, sir, came the reply from every station on the bridge. Can anyone here think of a good reason why we should be afraid of them? No, sir. Jake pressed the fleet communication button again. All ships, this is Morrison. Standard Tuesday protocols are now in effect. Lisa, start the coffee makers. This is going to be fun. As the human fleet prepared for what was to come, Jake Morrison sat back in his captain's chair and did something that no other species in the galaxy had ever done when facing the Xerian Empire. He laughed, not a nervous laugh or a scared laugh, but a deep, happy laugh that filled the bridge and spread through the communication channels to every ship in the fleet. Soon, 23 human ships were filled with the sound of laughter, and for the first time in 1,000 years, the Xerian Empire was about to learn what it meant to pick a fight with the wrong species. Admiral Kethfer stared at the screen in his command center. His 4 yellow eyes blinked slowly as he tried to understand what he was seeing. The human ships were still there, floating in space like tiny insects compared to his massive fleet. But something was wrong. Instead of fear or panic, his sensors were picking up something else from the human vessels. They were laughing. All of them. Commander. Zechtel walked over to the admiral's chair. He was younger than Kethfer, with darker gray skin and only 3 scars across his face instead of the dozen that marked an experienced Imperial officer. Admiral, our translation computers are working perfectly. The humans are definitely laughing. All of their ships are sending out the same signals. Kethfer had been an admiral in the Xerian Empire for over 200 years. He had conquered 47 star systems and destroyed 12 different species who had refused to surrender. In all that time, he had never seen a reaction like this. Laughing, he repeated slowly. They received our ultimatum and they are laughing. Yes, sir. Our computers say it is a sound that humans make when they find something funny or amusing. The admiral stood up from his chair and walked to the large window that looked out into space. The human ships were so small compared to his dreadnoughts that he could barely see them. Each of his ships carried enough firepower to destroy a moon. His smallest ship had more weapons than all of the human ships combined. Commander, show me the intelligence reports on this species again. Zechtel pressed several buttons on his control panel, the main screen filled with information about humans. They are a young species, Admiral. They only left their home planet about 100 years ago. They have built colonies on only 3 worlds. Their technology appears to be primitive compared to ours. Their ships are small and seem to be built for basic space travel, not for war. Kethver studied the information. Everything looked normal. This should have been a simple conquest. The humans should have been terrified. They should have surrendered immediately when they saw the size of his fleet. What about their weapons? He asked. Basic energy weapons, sir. Nothing that could damage our shields. Their ships don't even seem to have proper armor. Our scans show they are made of simple metal alloys. The Admiral shook his head. Then why are they laughing? Have they gone insane with fear? That is possible, sir. Some species do react strangely when they realize they are about to be destroyed. On the human ship USS Liberty, Captain Jake Morrison was still chuckling as he watched the Zarian fleet on his screen. The alien ships were beautiful in their own way, he had to admit. They were huge and dark, covered with weapons and armor plating. They looked like they had been designed to scare people, and they were very good at it. Amy, are you getting any? More messages from our friends? He asked. Lieutenant Amy Collins checked her communication systems. No, sir, nothing yet. I think they're confused about something. Lisa, how's that coffee coming along? Lieutenant Lisa Parker looked up from her engineering station. Almost ready, Captain. I made it extra strong, just like you asked. Perfect. Pete, what do you think of their fleet? Lieutenant Pete Johnson was studying the enemy ships on his weapons display. They're big, sir, really big. And they have a lot of guns, but ... double quotes him paused and looked at his captain. Sir, do you remember what happened the last time someone threatened? U.S. with big ships and lots of guns? Jake smiled. Which time, Pete? The Vegan Confederacy, the Stellar Alliance? Or maybe you're thinking of the Galactic Trade Federation. All of them, sir. They all had the same look. Big, scary ships, lots of weapons, very serious about conquering us. Amy laughed, and they all went home with their tails between their legs. That's not fair, Amy, Lisa said with a grin. The vegans don't have tails. The bridge crew laughed again. This was becoming a regular thing for them. Over the past year, they had faced 5 different galactic empires and universal federations and stellar confederacies. They all had the same plan: show up with big ships, make threats, demand surrender, and they all learned the same lesson. Humans don't surrender. Back on the Zarian flagship, Admiral Kethver was getting more confused by the minute. His communication. Officers were reporting that the humans were not just laughing, but talking to each other like they were having a casual conversation. They were talking about coffee and previous battles and something called tail between legs. Sir, Commander, Zechtel said, should we begin the attack? Our weapons are ready. Kethver thought about it. The normal procedure was to wait for the surrender deadline, but these humans were acting very strange. Maybe it would be better to end this quickly. No, he decided. Something is not right here. These humans are not acting like any species we have conquered before. I want to know why they are not afraid. He pressed a button on his chair that opened a communication channel to the human fleet. Humans, this is Admiral Kethver. You have received our ultimatum. You will surrender now, or we will destroy you. Why do you laugh at the power of the Zarian Empire? The screen flickered and showed the bridge of the human ship. The Admiral was surprised by what he saw. The humans looked relaxed. They were sitting in their chairs like they were having a normal day at work. The captain was drinking something from a small cup. Admiral Kethver, the human captain said with a smile. I'm Captain Jake Morrison. Thank you for calling. We're laughing because, well, this is kind of funny to us. Funny? Kethver's voice was full of confusion. You find our ultimatum funny? Not the ultimatum itself, Jake said, but the situation. You see, Admiral, you're the 10th alien empire to show up here in the past year. They all had the same message. Surrender or be destroyed. They all had big ships and scary weapons. And they all went home very disappointed. Kethver looked at his intelligence officers. None of them had mentioned other alien empires. What happened to these other empires? Oh, they're fine, Jake said, taking another sip of his coffee. We sent them home with a message. The same message we're going to send you. And what message is that? Jake set down his cup and looked directly at the Admiral. Leave us alone. The Admiral's 4 eyes narrowed. You are in no position to make demands, human. We have 347 ships. You have 23. We have weapons that can destroy planets? You have ... What do you have? Jake looked around his bridge at his crew. Amy was smiling. Pete was checking his weapons systems. Lisa was pouring coffee into cups for everyone. They all looked completely calm. Admiral, Jake said, let me ask you something. In your 1,000 years of conquest, how many species have you fought that had experience fighting wars? All of them had weapons, Kethfer replied. All of them had ships. That's not what I asked. How many of them had experience fighting wars against their own species? How many of them had spent thousands of years learning how to fight? Kethfer was quiet for a moment. Most of the species the Empire had conquered had been peaceful. They had built their ships for exploration or trade, not for war. Even the ones with weapons had never faced an enemy like the Empire before. Humans are different, Admiral, Jake continued. We've been fighting each other since before we could. Walk upright. We've built weapons that can crack planets open. We've built defenses that can stop almost anything. But more importantly, we've learned something that you haven't learned yet. What is that? Jake smiled. We've learned that the best way to win a war is to make sure your enemy doesn't want to fight you in the first place. The communication ended. Admiral Kethfer stared at the blank screen for a long moment. Then he turned to his officers. Prepare for battle, he said. I want to see what these humans can do. But deep inside, for the first time in his long military career, Admiral Kethfer was beginning to feel something he had never felt before when facing an enemy. He was beginning to feel worried. Admiral Kethfer gave the order that had destroyed 1,000 worlds. Begin the attack. Fire all weapons. The Zarian fleet moved forward like a wall of metal and death. 347 ships, each one the size of a small city, turned their weapons toward the tiny human fleet. The space between them filled with the glow of charging energy weapons. On the bridge of the USS Liberty, Captain Jake Morrison finished his coffee and set the cup down gently. Well, here we go. Amy, are you recording this? Lieutenant Amy Collins nodded. Yes, sir. Full battle recording is active. Command back home is going to want to see this. Good. Pete, are you ready? Lieutenant Pete Johnson looked up from his weapons. Station. Sir, do you want me to fire back? Not yet. Let's see what they've got first. The first wave of Zarian energy beams crossed the space between the fleets. These were weapons that could turn asteroids into dust, that could burn through the strongest known metals like they were paper. The beams were so powerful that they lit up the darkness of space like tiny suns. The energy hit the human ship's dot and nothing happened. Admiral, Kethfer watched his tactical display with growing confusion. The energy readings showed that his weapons had hit their targets perfectly. But the human ships were still there, floating in space like nothing had happened. Report? He shouted. Commander Zekta was staring at his instruments with wide eyes. Sir, our weapons hit their targets. Direct hits on all 23 enemy ships, but... He paused and checked his readings again. But the human ships show no damage. In fact, they're getting brighter. Kethfer looked at the main screen. The human ships were indeed getting brighter. They were glowing with a soft blue light that grew stronger as he watched. What is happening? He demanded. Sir, it appears that their ships are absorbing our energy attacks. The energy is not damaging them, it's powering them up. On the Liberty, Lieutenant Lisa Parker was looking at her engineering displays with satisfaction. Captain, energy absorption is working perfectly. We're now at 120% power. All systems are running better than normal. Jake nodded. How are the other ships doing? All ships report the same thing, sir. The alien weapons are just making us stronger. Pete Johnson shook his head in amazement. Sir, they're actually helping us. Should I send them a thank you message? Not yet, Pete. Let's see what else they try. The second wave of Zarian attacks came immediately. This time, Admiral Kethfer ordered his ships to use their most powerful weapons. These were planet-cracking energy cannons that had never failed to destroy their targets. The beams hit the human ships and made them glow even brighter. "This is impossible," Kethver shouted. "No species has ever been able to absorb our weapons." "Sir," his science officer reported, "our scans show that the human ships are not just absorbing the energy. They're converting it into power for their own systems. It's like they were designed specifically to fight against energy weapons." The Admiral felt something cold growing in his stomach. "Were they designed to fight us?" "Sir, I don't think they were designed to fight us specifically. I think they were designed to fight everyone." Captain Morrison opened a communication channel to the Zarian flagship. "Admiral Kethver, this is Captain Morrison. Thank you for the energy boost." "Our coffee." "Makers are working perfectly now." The alien admiral appeared on the screen, and Jake could see the confusion and growing fear in his 4 yellow eyes. "How are you doing this? How are your ships absorbing our weapons?" "It's simple, really," Jake said. "We learned from our mistakes. Every time we humans fought a war, we studied what went wrong. We looked at how our enemies beat us, and we made sure it couldn't happen again. What does that have to do with our weapons?" Jake leaned back in his chair. "Admiral, humans have been fighting with energy weapons for over 100 years. We've built weapons that use lasers, plasma, particle beams, and things that don't even have names yet. We've also learned how to defend against all of them." He gestured to the walls of his ship. "Every human ship is built with energy absorption technology. We don't just defend against energy weapons, we eat them. The more you shoot at us, the stronger we get." Lieutenant Amy Collins added, "Sir, should I tell him about the kinetic barriers?" "Let's save that for when they try missiles," Jake replied. "Admiral." Kethver was beginning to understand that he had made a terrible mistake. "What other defenses do you have?" "All of them," Jake said simply. "We have defenses against energy weapons, kinetic weapons, biological weapons, chemical weapons, nuclear weapons, and about 50 other types of weapons that most species haven't even invented yet." The Admiral tried to process this information. "But you are a young species. You have only been in space for 100 years. That's right. But we've been fighting wars for 10,000 years. We've been really, really good at it for a long time." Pete Johnson looked up from his weapons station. "Captain, they're charging up for another attack. Different type of weapon this time." "Looks like missiles." "Kinetic weapons," Jake said too. The Admiral. "Good choice. Energy weapons didn't work, so you're trying something physical. That makes sense." "How do you know what we're going to do?" "Because it's what we would do. When energy weapons don't work, you try kinetic weapons. When kinetic weapons don't work, you try biological weapons. When biological weapons don't work, you try chemical weapons. We've tried everything, Admiral. We know how this works." The Zarian fleet launched a cloud of missiles toward the human ships. These were not ordinary missiles, but weapons that could punch through the armor of any known ship. They moved at incredible speed. Guided by the most advanced targeting systems in the galaxy, the missiles hit the human ships and exploded. In brilliant flashes of light, when the light faded, the human ships were still there, completely undamaged. "Kinetic barriers," Lisa Parker reported. "Working perfectly. The missiles couldn't even touch our hulls." Admiral Kethver watched his most powerful weapons fail again. "This is not possible. Nothing can stop both energy and kinetic weapons." "We can," Jake said. "We've been shot at by everything you can imagine, Admiral. We've built our ships to handle anything that anyone can throw at us." The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked the question that he was afraid to ask. "What about your weapons? What can you do to us?" Jake smiled, but it was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a predator who had been playing with his prey. "Admiral, you really don't want to know. But I'll tell you anyway. We can do whatever we want to you. We can disable your weapons without damaging your ships. We can shut down your engines without hurting your crew. We can take control of your computers without you even knowing it. You're lying. Pete, show him." Lieutenant Pete Johnson pressed a single button on his weapons console. On the main screen, they could see one of the smaller Zarian ships suddenly go dark, its lights went out, its engines stopped, and it began to drift in space. "We just shut down one of your ships," Jake said. "Your crew is fine. They have air and heat and everything they need. But their ship won't work until we let it work." Pete pressed another button. The Zarian ship's lights came back on. "How did you do that?" Admiral Kethver asked. "We hacked into their computer systems," Amy Collins said. "It took about 3 seconds. Their computer security is about 50 years behind ours." Jake stood up from his chair. "Admiral, let me explain something to you. We didn't come out here to conquer anybody. We came out here to explore, to build new homes, to learn about the universe. But every few months, some alien empire shows up and tries to conquer us. And every time we have to teach them the same lesson." "What lesson?" "Don't pick a fight with humans. We're really, really good at fighting, and we don't like bullies." The Bridge of the Liberty was quiet for a moment, then Jake continued. "Now, Admiral, you have 2 choices. You can keep trying to fight us, and we'll keep showing you how badly outmatched you are. Or you can go home and tell your Emperor that the humans are not interested in being conquered." Admiral Kethver looked at his officers. They were all staring at him, waiting for his decision. For the first time in his career, he was facing an enemy that was stronger than the Zarian Empire. What happens if we choose to keep fighting? "He?" asked. Jake's smile disappeared. "Then we stop playing games." Captain Jake Morrison looked at the face of Admiral Kethver on his screen. The alien's 4 yellow eyes were wide with something that looked like fear. Good. It was about time the Zarian Empire learned what fear felt like. "Admiral," Jake said, in a calm voice, "I think you've seen enough of our defenses. Now let me show you what we can do when we stop being polite." He turned to his crew. "All right, everyone. Time to stop playing games. Amy, send a message to all ships. Tell them it's time for a proper demonstration." Lieutenant Amy Collins nodded and started typing on her keyboard. "Message sent, Captain. All ships are ready for combat operations." "Lisa, how are our systems?" Lieutenant Lisa Parker checked her engineering displays. "All systems are running at 150% power, thanks to the energy our guests gave us. Everything is working perfectly." "Pete, target their weapon systems only. We want to disable them, not destroy them. We need survivors to go home and tell stories." Lieutenant Pete Johnson smiled as he looked at his weapons controls. "Understood, sir. Surgical strikes only. This is going to be fun." Jake opened a communication channel to the entire human fleet. "Attention all ships, this is Captain Morrison. Our new friends have seen our defenses. Now they need to see our offense. Remember, we're not trying to kill anyone today. We want them to go home and tell everyone in their empire what they saw here." He paused and looked out at the Zarian fleet. "Begin demonstration. Show them what real space combat looks like." The human ships began to move. Admiral Kethver watched his tactical display in growing horror as the human ships changed from stationary targets into something else entirely. They moved like living things, flowing through space in patterns that seemed impossible. "Sir," Commander Zekta reported, "the human ships are moving in ways that our computers cannot predict. They're not following any known flight patterns." "How fast are they moving?" "So they're not moving fast. They're moving strangely, like they're dancing." The Admiral looked at the main screen and saw that his officer was right. The human ships were not flying in straight lines or in the rigid formations that military ships normally used. Instead, they moved like they were part of some kind of dance, flowing around each other in smooth curves and spirals. "What are they doing?" he asked. "I don't know, sir. But our targeting computers cannot lock onto them. Every time we try to aim at one of their ships, it moves somewhere else." On the bridge of the USS Liberty, Jake Morrison was watching the dance begin. This was something that human pilots had learned over decades of fighting. When you were outnumbered, you didn't fight like a traditional military force. You fought like a pack of wolves. "Beautiful," he said softly. "Lisa, are you recording this for the flight schools back home?" "Yes, sir." "They're going to love this." The human ships moved through the Zarian fleet like water flowing around rocks. They were never where the alien ships expected them to be. Every time a Zarian ship tried to turn its weapons toward a human ship, the target was already gone, dancing away to a new position. Pete, begin Phase 1. Disable their weapons. Yes, sir. The human ships began to fire. But these were not the crude energy beams or explosive missiles that the Zarians had used. These were precision tools, weapons that could target specific systems on enemy ships without damaging anything else. Thin beams of blue light reached out from the human ships and touched the Zarian vessels. Wherever the beams hit, weapon systems simply stopped working. Gun turrets went dark, missile launchers shut down, and energy cannons powered off. In less than 30 seconds, the entire Zarian fleet was disarmed. Report, Admiral Kethver shouted. Sir, all weapons are offline, all of them, every ship in the fleet. But everything else is working normally. Life support, engines, communications, all functional. How is that possible? Sir, their weapons seem to be able to target individual systems. They shut down our weapons without damaging anything else. The Admiral stared at his tactical display. His massive fleet, the pride of the Zarian Empire, was now helpless. But the human ships were not attacking. They were just continuing their strange dance around his vessels. Jake Morrison opened a communication channel to the alien flagship. Admiral, that was Phase 1. Now let me show you Phase 2. What is Phase 2? Kethver asked, though he was not sure he wanted to know. Speed. The human ship suddenly accelerated. But this was not normal acceleration. They moved faster than Admiral Kethver had ever seen any ship move. They shot through space like bullets, weaving between the massive Zarian dreadnoughts at impossible speeds. Sir, Commander Zechtel shouted. They're moving faster than light, but they're not entering hyperspace. They're doing it in normal space. That's impossible. Sir, one of their ships just passed within 10 meters of our hull. At faster than light speed, in normal space, Admiral Kethver watched as human ships zipped past his flagship so fast that they were just streaks of light. But they were not flying in straight lines. They were still dancing, still moving in those flowing patterns, but now they were doing it at speeds that should have been impossible. How are they doing this? He asked. Sir, our scientists always said that faster than light travel in normal space was impossible. The energy requirements would be infinite. Then how are they doing it? Captain Morrison's voice came over the communication channel. We solved the energy problem, Admiral. It turns out that when you build ships that can absorb unlimited energy from enemy weapons, you can do things that other species think are impossible. One of the human ships flew directly over the Zarian flagship, so close that the Admiral could see the details of its hull. It was not a large ship, maybe 1/10 the size of his dreadnought, but it moved with a grace and speed that made his massive warship seem like a floating rock. Phase 3, Jake announced. The human ships stopped moving and arranged themselves in a perfect sphere around the Zarian fleet. Every alien ship was now surrounded by human vessels, but the humans were not pointing weapons at them. Admiral, Jake said, we could have destroyed your entire fleet in the first 10 seconds of this fight. We could have killed every person on every ship, but we didn't. Do you know why? Kethver was quiet for a long moment. Why? Because we're not monsters. We don't enjoy killing. We just want to be left alone. The Admiral looked around his bridge, at his officers. They were all staring at him, waiting for orders. But what orders could he give? His weapons were disabled, his ships were surrounded, and the enemy could move faster than his sensors could track. What do you want from us? He asked. I want you to go home, Admiral. I want you to tell your Emperor what you saw here today. I want you to make sure that every species in your empire knows that humans are not interested in being conquered. And if we refuse, if we come back with more ships? Jake Morrison's voice became very quiet and very serious. Admiral, what you've seen today is what we do when we're being polite, when we're trying not to hurt anyone, when we're playing games. He paused and let that sink in. If you come back, if you threaten our worlds again, if you point weapons at our ships, we won't be playing games anymore. We won't be polite. And you really, really don't want to see what we do when we're not being polite. Admiral Kethver felt a chill run through his body. What would you do? We would end your empire, Admiral. All of it. Every ship, every station, every world. We would make sure that the Zarian Empire was just a story that other species told their children to scare them. The bridge of the Zarian. Flagship was completely quiet. No one moved. No one spoke. But we don't want to do that, Jake continued. We want to explore the galaxy. We want to make friends with other species. We want to trade and learn and build a better future for everyone. We just want to do it without being bothered by bullies. The captain stood up from his chair. Your weapons are coming back online now, Admiral. Your ships are fully functional. Consider this a professional courtesy between warriors. Take your fleet and go home. Tell your Emperor that the age of conquest is over. The communication channel closed. The human ships began to move away from the Zarian fleet. Still moving in those impossible patterns, Admiral Kethver watched them. Go, then he turned to his officers. Set course for the imperial capital, he said quietly. And prepare a message for the Emperor. Tell him we need to discuss a change in policy. 3 days later, Admiral Kethver stood in the great throne room of the Zarian Empire. The room was enormous, with black walls that reached up into darkness and a floor made of polished stone that reflected the light from 1,000 glowing crystals. At the far end of the room sat Emperor Vexthal on his golden throne. The Emperor was old, even by Zarian standards. His gray skin was covered with the ritual scars of 100 conquered worlds, and his 4 yellow eyes glowed with the power that came from ruling 3,000 star systems. He had been emperor for over 500 years, and in all that time, no military force had ever dared to challenge the might of his empire. Until now. Admiral Kethver, the emperor said in a voice that echoed through the huge room. You have returned from the human colony earlier than expected. I trust the conquest went well. Kethver walked forward and knelt before the throne. Around the room, dozens of other imperial officers and nobles watched him. These were the most powerful beings in the galaxy, the rulers of species that had surrendered to Zarian might long ago. Your Imperial Majesty, Kethver said carefully, the mission did not go as planned. The Emperor leaned forward on his throne. Explain. The humans refused to surrender, Majesty. We engaged them in battle, and you destroyed them, of course. Kethver was quiet for a long moment. No, Majesty. We did not. The throne room became completely silent. No one moved. No one even seemed to breathe. In the 1,000-year history of the Zarian Empire, no admiral had ever returned from a conquest mission to report failure. You did not destroy them, the Emperor repeated slowly. A fleet of 23 primitive ships defeated the Imperial Navy. Yes, Majesty? Emperor Vexthal stood up from his throne. He was a huge alien nearly 3 meters tall, and when he was angry, his presence filled the room. Like a storm. How is this possible? Admiral Kethver told the story. He described the human ships that absorbed energy weapons and made them stronger. He told about the kinetic barriers that stopped missiles without any effort. He explained how the humans had disabled his entire fleet in 30 seconds and then moved at impossible speeds through normal space. When he finished, the throne room was still silent. You are telling me, the Emperor said, that this young species has technology that is superior to ours. Yes, Majesty, but that is not the worst part. There is worse. They were holding back, Majesty. Everything they showed us was just a demonstration? They made it clear that they could have destroyed our entire fleet at any time, but they chose not to. The Emperor walked down from his throne and stood directly in front of the Admiral. Why did they spare your fleet? They said they wanted survivors to come home and tell the story. They wanted us to deliver a message. What message? Kethver took a deep breath. They want to be left alone, Majesty. They said that the age of conquest is over. They said that if we ever threaten them again, they will end our empire. The Emperor was quiet for a long time. Then he asked, Do you believe they can do it? Yes, Majesty. I believe they could destroy every ship, every station, and every world in our empire. And I believe they could do it quickly. Emperor Vexful walked back to his throne and sat down heavily. Tell me more about these humans. They are not like any species we have encountered before, Majesty. They have been fighting wars for thousands of years, not against other species, but against each other. They have learned to build weapons and defenses that we cannot even understand. But more importantly, they have learned something that we have never learned. What is that? They have learned how to win wars without fighting them, the Emperor thought about this. Explain. They could have destroyed us, Majesty, but instead they sent us home with a message. Now everyone in our empire will know that there is a species that can defeat us. Other species will hear this story and realize that they do not have to be afraid of us anymore. The humans have ended our reign of terror without firing a single shot. In the human colony of New Haven, Captain Jake Morrison was sitting in a small cafe, drinking coffee and reading reports from Earth. The cafe was busy with colonists going about their daily lives, talking and laughing like nothing had happened. Children were playing in the street outside, and merchants were selling goods from the newest ships that had arrived from Earth. Lieutenant Amy Collins walked over to his table and sat down. Captain, we just received a message from the Zarian Empire. Jake looked up from his reports. Already? That was fast. The message is addressed to all human colonies on Earth. It's signed by Emperor Vexthal himself. What does it say? Amy smiled. It says that the Zarian Empire recognizes human space as sovereign territory and will not interfere with human expansion or colonization. It also says that any Imperial ship that enters human space without permission will be considered an act of war. Jake laughed. They're scared, yes, sir. But there's more. The message also includes a warning to all other species in the galaxy. It says that humans are under Imperial protection and that any attack on human colonies will be considered an attack on the Empire itself. They're using us as their shield, Jake said with amusement. They're so afraid of us that they want everyone to think we're their allies. Lieutenant Pete Johnson walked over from the counter with his own cup of coffee. Captain, I just talked to some traders who came in from the Vegan Confederacy. They say the whole galaxy is talking about what happened. Here, what are they saying? They're saying that the humans laughed at the Zarian Empire and sent them home with their tails between their legs. Some species are calling it the greatest military victory in galactic history. Lieutenant Lisa Parker joined them at the table. Sir, I've been monitoring communications from all over the galaxy. Dozens of species are sending messages to Earth asking for trade agreements and defense treaties. Everyone wants to be friends with the humans now. Jake took a sip of his coffee and looked out the window at the peaceful colony street. Good. That's what we wanted. Sir, Amy asked, do you think they'll really leave us alone now? The Zarians? Yes, I think they will. They're not stupid. They know what will happen if they try to fight us again. What about other species? There are still a lot of empires and confederations out there. Jake smiled. Let them come. We'll handle them the same way we handled the Zarians. We'll show them what happens when you pick a fight with humans. Pete raised his coffee cup. To the shortest war in galactic history. To the war that ended all. Wars, Lisa added. To making friends the hard way, Amy said. Jake raised his own cup. To being left alone. They drank their coffee and watched the people of New Haven go about their daily lives. In the distance, they could see human ships coming and going from the spaceport, carrying goods and passengers between the human worlds. The ships moved freely through space that had been claimed by the Zarian Empire. Just a week ago, the story of the day the humans laughed at the Galactic Empire spread throughout known space faster than the fastest ships. Every species in the galaxy heard the tale of how 23 small human ships had faced down the greatest military force in the universe and sent them home defeated. Some species laughed when they heard the story. Others were amazed. A few were terrified. But all of them learned the same lesson. Don't mess with humans. The Zarian Empire, which had ruled the galaxy through fear for 1,000 years, slowly began to change. They stopped attacking other species. They stopped demanding tribute from conquered worlds. They became just another empire among many, no longer the terror of the galaxy other aggressive species saw. What had happened to the Xerians and decided that maybe conquest wasn't such a good idea after all? Trade became more popular than war. Diplomacy became more common than battle. The galaxy became a more peaceful place, and in the human colonies, people continued to laugh and drink coffee and build new homes among the stars. They had proven something that no other species in the galaxy had ever proven. Sometimes, the best way to stop a bully is to laugh at them, then show them what you can do when you stop laughing.